Look closely at the bifurcating stripes of a tiger. What you are observing is a physical system that has spontaneously collapsed from a state of microscopic uniformity into a macroscopic, quasi-periodic geometry. We see the exact same structural collapse on a planetary scale. Near the south pole of Saturn's moon Enceladus, the icy crust is scarred by massive parallel tectonic crevasses. Scaling down to the atomic level, we find identical physical behaviors in quasi-crystal alloys, forged under the extreme thermodynamic shock of planetary impacts. For decades, developmental biology, condensed matter physics, and topology have treated these phenomena as isolated anomalies. Biologists study the animal coats, geologists study the ice, and physicists study the alloys, rarely communicating across their disciplinary boundaries. The Canon of Infinity, or TOI framework, provides a unified mathematical ontology to connect them. The TOI framework is a strict methodological specification for understanding how mathematical invariants survive across transitioning systems. Under this framework, these distinct patterns are isomorphic physical expressions of topological knotting. Contextual infinity defines a physical boundary condition where the energetic growth of an operation exceeds the spatial or systemic limits of its environment. When a system hits that threshold of contextual infinity, it cannot diverge endlessly. It is forced to fracture into highly structured aperiodic geometry. Complex natural order is mathematically mandated by spatial limits. The inquiry into how these structures emerge begins with mathematician Alan Turing's 1952 paper on morphogenesis. Turing proposed a reaction-diffusion system driven by interacting chemical agents called morphogens. The process starts with an activator chemical that promotes a localized biological trait, like the production of melanin. Simultaneously, the system produces an inhibitor morphogen. This inhibitor actively suppresses the activator, but it diffuses at a strictly faster rate through the surrounding cellular tissue. Because the inhibitor moves faster, it overtakes and surrounds the activator. This competitive diffusion traps the activator in stable, localized bands, driving a completely homogeneous environment into a structured, heterogeneous state. Turing modeled this using continuous partial differential equations that operate entirely from the bottom up. There is no centralized genetic architect telling the cells where to place the stripes. Macroscopic biological patterns are inevitable physical properties dictated solely by localized chemical constraints. Chaotic potential naturally and predictably organizes into measurable structure. We can translate those continuous fluid equations into discrete computational models using one-dimensional cellular automata. A cellular automaton is a grid of discrete cells that evolve over time according to strictly localized rules based on neighboring states. Think of the pigmentation arrays on a mollusk shell. The growing edge of the shell acts as a biological printer. Each cell assesses the color of its immediate neighbors to determine its own state for the next line of growth. The geometric equivalent of this discrete chronological sequence is an aperiodic tiling, formalized by mathematician Roger Penrose. Penrose tilings utilize limited prototiles, kites and darts. Forced joining rules strictly prohibit any translational symmetry across an infinite plane. This architecture is inextricably bound to the golden ratio, phi. Its inherent irrationality prevents the geometry from ever falling into a repetitive, periodic state. A predator's bifurcating camouflage relies precisely on this mathematical breakdown of strict periodicity. The irregular, localized rules define the aperiodic geometry, allowing the tiger to visually separate itself from the periodic background of tall grass. To understand exactly why physical systems are forced to adopt these phi-scaled shapes at their spatial limits, we have to move from spatial geometry into pure algebraic topology. The Canon of Infinity framework provides the core operative triad to measure these phase shifts. It begins with psi. Psi represents the unconstrained possibility field, or the raw fluid potential of the system. The second operator is phi. This is the symmetry and selection channel that forces that raw potential onto rigid convergence rails. The final operator is theta. Theta represents the topological event horizon that permanently ties off a bounded context, forcing the progression to collapse into a defined knot. When a system attempts to extend beyond its safe closure, it triggers a knot infinity event. This is a diagonal contradiction where the model fails to resolve within its own rules, forcing the system to initiate a topological knotting response to survive. Mathematical invariants function as active physical signals of closure failure, dictating the threshold where a continuous potential collapses into a discrete structure. We can analytically measure these knot infinity events using massive datasets of higher-order Alexander polynomials. An Alexander polynomial is a foundational algebraic invariant used to classify the topological properties of knots. From these polynomials, we extract the primary metric, the logarithmic Mahler measure. This evaluates the unit circle average using Jensen's formula, serving as an intrinsic analytic observable of a knot's size and complexity. According to Kroneker's theorem, a Mahler measure of exactly 1 signals a perfect cyclotomic closure. This is the mathematical equivalent of an unbroken, fully periodic state. Conversely, systems experiencing massive closure anomalies exhibit large Mahler measures. These act as theta generators, violently violating the expected closure semantics of their class and forcing a context elevation. The critical data point lies in the figure-8 knot, which serves as a minimal geometry baseline. Its Mahler measure evaluates exactly to the golden ratio. The exact reappearance of phi within this topological audit mathematically proves that the aperiodic geometry of Penrose tiles and the knotting of algebraic space are driven by the exact same tension mechanism. We can visualize this topological tension in motion using a discrete cybernetic state map known as the Amanda loop. The Amanda loop is an encapsulated engine representing an isolated local world defined by strict constraints. The integer states of the loop are strictly governed by a Fibonacci recurrence. This ensures that as the system runs toward infinity, its structural progression is permanently anchored to the golden ratio. The engine's dynamics are codified by specific modalities, like the J13 valve of tension. This mechanism regulates the permeability between states, mathematically initiating highly energetic pinch events during extreme state contractions. When visualized in three-dimensional phase space, these pinch events manifest physically as sharp twisting chevron folds that crease the exterior envelope of a toroidal manifold. This discrete cybernetic engine simulates physical reality. It translates chaotic kinetic energy into highly ordered quasi-periodic geometries to bleed off otherwise insurmountable pressure. We can pull the abstract dynamics of the Amanda loop directly back to the physical observations made by the Cassini probe at Saturn's moon Enceladus. Advanced geodynamic models and thermal mapping confirm the existence of internal wave attractors hidden deep within the moon's subsurface liquid ocean. These internal attractors localize immense tidal dissipation. They concentrate massive amounts of turbulent kinetic energy directly against the solid boundary of the ice shell. The physical isomorphism is undeniable. The geometric shape of those subsurface wave attractors perfectly matches the aperiodic tiger stripes venting cryovolcanic heat on the surface. The subsurface ocean acts as the continuous fluid potential, building stress until it hits the knot infinity boundary of the ice shell. The ice fractures, functioning identically to the J13 valve of tension we observed in the mathematical automaton. Whether expressed through the chemical diffusion of a tiger's coat, the golden ratio parameters of a topological knot, or the tidal fracturing of a planetary crust, the universe relies on a single mechanism. When continuous growth encounters absolute limits, it resolves the contradiction by shedding symmetry and locking chaotic energy into eternal aperiodic form.